الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiliw, telas ng sinangalan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyag ka ng magiting, sa mandulupin, di ka pasisingil, sa nagatang tutok sa simoy at sa langit ng bagaw, ay hinatang tula, tawid sa pagkayang minamahal, ang isang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na nag-iindig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pang ay di magtitingin, lumalang araw. Bakit pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo, ang hindi kaya na pagkay magagit, at mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Pamantasan, pamantasan mahal, nag-upugay kamit nagbabalay, ng pag-ibig tapos na paggalang, sa patnubay ng aming isipan. Karunungan mo'y kaunlaran, inuubog kaming kabataan, maging Pilipinong mayroong dangal, puso'y bigil ng kadakilaan. Pamantasan lungsod ng Maynila, kaming lahat ito'y iyong tula. Tutuparin pangarap mo't nasa, pamantasan kami nanunumpa. Pamantasan lungsod ng Maynila, kaming lahat ito'y iyong tula. Tutuparin pangarap mo't nasa, pamantasan kami nanunumpa.
Ladies and gentlemen, English speakers, Her Excellency, YULIIA, OLEKSANDRIVNA, the Ambassador, Its General in the Extraordinary, and the Plenipotentiary of Ukraine to the Republic of the Philippines, Attorney Atty CRUZ-FERRER, former legal advisor and international humanitarian coordinator in International Committee of the Red Cross of the Philippines, Brigadier General Francisco Domingo FERNANDEZ, is the armed forces of the Philippines one center. Esteemed guest, respected Professor Dr. Alexandra P. Balico and Dr. Mike who have people talking. Dear students, very pleasant good afternoon. It is my honor and my privilege to welcome all of you to all of this year's symposium. Today, we gather to engage in the thoughtful discussions of some of the most significant and contemporary law fields that continue to evolve and challenge the systems around the world. At the forefront of our program are two topics that remain profoundly relevant international humanitarian law and international human law. These areas of law are more than academic disciplines. They embody the collective functions of the international community and serve as institutions, as instruments for safeguarding human dignity, limiting the horrors of war, conflict, and ensuring that fundamental rights are promoted regardless of nationality, belief, or perception in a people and a world consumed by persistent conflict, mass displacement, humanitarian crisis, and the complete collapse standing. The principle and underlying this policy demand not only our attention but our committee. This symposium provides us with a timely opportunity to reflect on the symposium. It provides us with the timely opportunity to reflect on these issues with the depth and discernment. We are fortunate to be joined by distinguished experts and practitioners, and who will share their insight, experience, and perspectives. Their contributions will help us better understand not only the legal procedures, but also the ethical and human dimensions that guide us in the legal application of these laws. We, as aspiring scholars, practitioners, and advocates, may we use this gathering to learn from one another and to question, to challenge and assumptions, and ultimately to strengthen our resolve to uphold justice both within and beyond our borders. Thank you for being part of this important activity. May today's discussion invite us to be to consult a large legal discussion and for the own compassion, integrity, and steadfast commitment to the rule of law. Welcome, and I wish you all a meaningful and insightful afternoon.
Thank you, Dean Justice Opelenia, for setting the tone of intellectual rigor and public service that guide our law school. At this point, we now invite Dr. Mike Zapin, one of our professors, to share his message. To the Dean of the Graduate School of Law, Justice Hector L. Popelena, our beloved Faculty Secretary, Attorney Rosal, and Ma'am Miles, our distinguished speakers, Her Excellency YULIIA OLEKSANDRIVNA, FEDIV, Brigadier General Francisco Domingo R. Fernandez, Atty. EVECAR, CRUZ-FERRER, where humanitarian principles, security realities, and legal principles converge with clarity and urgency. The message is unmistakable. The law must not remain a follower. It must always be. Today's conference is a timely reminder that the rule of law is still our most powerful architecture for stability, even in an era dominated by cyber conflict, autonomous systems, and geopolitical uncertainty. As practitioners and scholars, we stand at the intersection of principle, policy, and possibility. We carry the responsibility of designing frameworks that are both doctrinally sound and operationally relevant. Our distinguished speakers bring to the academe perspectives shaped in conflict zones, diplomatic missions, humanitarian work, and national defense. Their insights transcends borders, challenging us to think beyond traditional doctrines and to confront the legal demands of the world as it truly is. This is the intellectual discomfort that produces meaningful breakthroughs. As we move forward, allow me to crystallize our path through three imperatives. First is coherence in a fragmented world. Security, humanitarian action, and diplomacy
now unfolds across overlapping jurisdictions and rapidly shifting threats. Our responsibility is to craft legal frameworks that remain coherent even when the world does not. Whether the issue involves humanitarian concerns from the ICRC, security assessment from the AFP, or shifting geopolitical positions of our diplomatic partners, coherence anchors credible legal action. The second perspective is strategic collaboration. The challenge of our era, cyber vulnerabilities, hybrid warfare, humanitarian crises, territorial disputes, cannot be solved by siloed institutions. The law thrives when it is shaped by the insights of military officers, diplomats, humanitarian actors, researchers, scholars. Collaboration is not merely desirable, it is the backbone of resilience and innovation. Third is innovation with accountability. Technology, conflict, and global governance evolve too quickly for static legal responses. Yet innovation devoid of accountability poses its own dangers. Our task is to craft legal pathways that welcome progress while safeguarding human dignity. This is where the academy, the military, and the international community converge to ensure that the future we shape is both forward-looking and responsible. Taken together, these three imperatives form a single truth. The future of law demands coherence, collaboration, and courage in responsible innovation. Coherence grounds our institutions. Collaboration strengthens our collective capacity. Innovation propels us forward. When woven together, they transform the law from a mere set of rules into a living architecture capable of guiding nations and safeguarding lives. To the PLN, Masters of Law class on International Law Developments, congratulations for curating a conference that is both forward-thinking and deeply relevant. This is what legal education should be: rigorous, responsive, and rooted in real-world demands. Before I close, allow me to honor the humble story of how this conference, born as an academic requirement, came to life. Dr. Albarico and I were talking about our silent supporters we dearly call Mumu and Inu over the phone, while both of us were literally transiting, living our very principles with it. Dr. Albarico was stuck in a traffic on her way to a meeting with PCFR, while I was navigating the remote, unfinished provincial roads to conduct relief and legal aid in coordination with the AFP. It began quietly and with humility, yet it was executed excellently by a determined class supported by the ICRC, the AFP, the Ukrainian Embassy, and the PLM Graduate School of Law. It stands as a proof that meaningful work does not require grandeur, only purpose, discipline, and courage. This is the challenge we extend to you as your professor. Do not stop at studying or preaching the law. Do not pursue policy merely for prestige or an LLM title. Go beyond yourselves. Step into the lives and realities that needs your expertise. The privilege of being here allows you to transform the abstract into tangible and theoretical into life-changing. May today's dialogue sharpen our understanding and expand our courage to build a safer, more just, and more resilient world. Thank you, and I look forward to the conversations ahead. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Dr. Josephine, for your inspiring words. Before we proceed to our panel discussion, allow us to reflect briefly on the vision behind today's event. Law, security, and innovation reflect the world where the rule of law has kept pace with the demands of science, technology, and global security.
Yes, that's very true. As technology blurs national boundaries and redefines what threats mean, the law must remain both adaptive and principled. Our profession must rise to the challenge of building frameworks that are agile now to the future or for the future yet rooted in.
So this conference, organized under the guidance of Dr. Lungsod in international law development, was envisioned as a platform where theory meets action, and where scholars and practitioners exchange ideas that shape the legal systems of tomorrow.
Our distinguished panelists today embody this spirit of innovation and service through their work in humanitarian law, diplomacy, and defense. They remind us that the law is not only written in codes, it is lived out in decisions that affect lives, nations, and generations.
At this point, we now proceed to the centerpiece of today's program, the panel discussion. For our first panelist, our first panelist is Brigadier General Francisco Domingo R. Fernandez, who graduated from the Philippine Military Academy in 1991. He holds a Master in Business Management degree from the Asian Institute of Management and the Master in Military Studies from the Marine Corps University in Virginia, USA. He completed his company grade officer billet as the commanding officer of the 35th Marine Company MDLB-5 and held a range of key positions, notable of which were the following: the Flag Secretary of the 4 Marine Commandants, Deputy to the Assistant Chief, Staff of Controllership, Headquarters Marine Corps, Chief of the Corporate Planning Staff, FPSO Strategic Management Plan, Director Research and Doctrine Development Unit of the Marine Corps Training Center, Operations Officer of the 10th Marine Battalion, Deputy to the Assistant Chief of Staff for Operations, MC3, Acting Assistant Chief of Staff for Operations and Training, Assistant Chief of Staff for Education Training, MC8, Group Commander, Headquarters Service and Support Group, AFPCS DSP, Acting AC for Logistics, among others. Brigadier General Fernandez underwent various training and studies locally and abroad, among which are the Naval Officers Qualification Course, the Marine Basic Airborne Course, and the Naval Command and Staff Course, the USMC Command and Staff Course in Quantico, Virginia, USA, and the Comprehensive Security Cooperation Force at DKI ACCSS Honolulu, Hawaii. He is recognized for his knowledge in the areas of strategic planning and general management, and has developed various projects, studies, and strategy papers for the AFP and the civilian sector. He is an institutional mainstay for AFP-CGST classes as an enhancement speaker and lecturer, and a sought-after guest instructor facilitator in the Army, the Air Force, Navy, Marine units, and its offices, as well as other government agencies. Brigadier General Fernandez is currently the chief of the AFP Command Center located at their general headquarters, AFP Camp Aguinaldo, Quezon City. He is married to the former Ana Marie L. Cuni, and they are blessed with 3 children, namely Diana Marie, Catherine Ann, and Francisco Dominic. Ladies and gentlemen, it's all welcome Brigadier General Francisco Domingo R. Fernandez.
First of all, I apologize for my voice. I just finished a 5-day joint advanced work exam yesterday, wherein I was the facilitator, the lecturer, analyst throughout the day. I am also your last minute guest. For reasons I know would serve the greater purpose. That's why I'm here. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to join this symposium and offer to you a military perspective on a topic that is becoming more complex each year, charting the future of national security. As a caveat, I wish to inform you that the ideas and comments, just like what Attorney Lopez told me, is me as a Filipino, but not for the Philippines. So it should not be interpreted as reflecting the policy, practices, the Department of National Defense, or the armed forces of the Philippines. When most of you hear national security, the instinct is often to imagine soldiers, ships, tanks, territorial defense. However, as someone who has served in both operational units and strategic headquarters, I've learned that the future of national security is not defined by guns or ships alone. It is defined by ideas, institutions, alliances, and law. And that is why this conversation with legal experts is so important. Let me share 3 insights from the uniform perspective. Number 1, the security environment is no longer linear. As you have espoused, the threats we face today do not fit neatly within the traditional categories. We now operate in a world where state actors use gray zone tactics that fall short of open conflict. Malign influence operations target the minds and the will of our people. Cyber attacks can cripple economies without a single shot being fired. Natural disasters, pandemics, and climate extremes have national security implications. And in our own region, maritime disputes evolve daily, blending diplomacy, law, and the threat of war. In short, the battlefield is everywhere, at sea, online, public opinion, and in legal politics. Security is no longer just the job of the soldier. It is the job of the entire nation. Number two, the military's role is evolving. The AFP today is not the same AFP 20 or 30 years ago. We are undergoing a significant shift in national security operations to credible external defense. We have from purely kinetic operations to multi-domain operations. Can be an isolated actor to becoming a network force interoperable with allies and other agents. But perhaps the most important shift is this. We are not preparing just to fight wars, but to prevent them. Deterrence, presence, diplomacy backed by capability. All of this require a military that is not only strong, but also disciplined, lawful, and aligned with our democratic values. Number three, the future of national security lies in legitimacy, law, and human rights. In today's interconnected world, how we conduct military operations matters just as much as what we achieve. For the AFP, human rights and international law are not burdens. They are actually foundations of military professionalism. Why? Because wars today are fought in the open, in the media, in social networks, and in the judgment of the international community. A single violation of rights can erase specific limits, weaken alliances, and undermine our legitimacy. So for us in uniform, the rule of law is not a concept. It is actually an operational advantage. It strengthens public trust, it assures our allies, and it gives moral clarity. Even in the hardest environment, where the enemy blends with civilians, where provocation are deliberate, and where complexity is constant, the AFP's strength is our discipline, our restraint, and our commitment to lawful conduct. My message to you, lawyers, legal architects here today, you will shape the national security landscape as much as any soldier. Because the future battlefield includes courtroom and arbitration courts, treaty negotiations, cyber policy, intelligence oversights, maritime entitlements, and the legal frameworks that enable our military to operate effectively and ethically. Your work defines the environment in which we live in the country. National security now is a care profession. The soldier may stand on the front line, but the lawyer defines the boundaries of action, strengthens accountability, and upholds the standards that lead our democracy. To close, let me say this. The future of national security requires a military that is modern and multi-domain. But it is also requiring a nation that is anchored in law, legitimacy, and shared purpose. The AFP stands ready to defend the Philippines, but we cannot do it alone. We need a generation of legal professionals who can help shape the strategic, legal, and moral landscape of our future. Maraming salamat, and I do look forward to it.
For our second panelist, let me introduce to you our ambassador, extraordinary Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Ukraine in the Republic of the Philippines. Ms. FEDIV YULIIA OLEKSANDRIVNA. YULIIA FEDIV was born on December 29, 1986 in Chernivtsi, Ukraine, into a family of doctors. She graduated from the Chernivtsi Gymnasium No. 1 with honors, the Faculty of History, Political Science and International Relations, with the support of the German Federal Foreign Office. She graduated from the Strategic Architect Program at FEDIV Maynila Business School and the Crisis Management Program at FEDIV School of Economics. She interned at the United Nations in 2010 and the German Parliament in 2011. She began her professional career in 2008 as a specialist in international relations at the Korean State Medical University. From 2011 to 2016, she worked as a project manager at the German Polish Ukrainian Society in Lviv as part of the German government's support program. There, she coordinated the cultural and artistic project Inclusion for Children in Difficult Life Circumstances and was involved in creating the Ukrainian Network for Children's Rights. From 2014 to 2016, she coordinated cultural, artistic, and media projects of the Deutsche Welle Academy and the European Theatre Convention. From 2016 to 2017, she coordinated regional development projects of the German Technical Assistance Agency for Ukraine, PIT, and a partnership with Ukrainian cities government project of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation and Engagement Global GmbH. In 2017, she assumed leadership of the Creative Industries Development Department and temporarily acted as the director of the Ukrainian Center for Cultural Research, demonstrating her ability to take charge and inspire others. From 2017 to 2021, she held a pivotal role as the head of the National Bureau of European Union's Creative Europe program, significantly contributing to the development of culture and creative industries in Ukraine. In February 2018, she made history by being elected as the first executive director of the newly created state-owned Ukrainian Cultural Foundation, a role she held until her contract expired in 2021. Her pioneering work set the foundation for the organization's future success. From 2021 to 2022, she served as the director of Humanitarian, where she made significant contributions to the development and growth of the organization. And from 2022 to 2023, she was a Fulbright Humphrey Scholar in the U.S. Department of State. During this time, she completed advanced training in public administration at Syracuse University in New York, focusing on public-private partnerships. Following her Fulbright Humphrey Scholarship, she was appointed as a National Coordinator for Culture at the UNESCO office in Ukraine in 2023, a role that marked a significant step in her career. Her tenure as a member of the Board of Public Broadcasting from March 2024 to 2025 provided her with a deep understanding of broadcasting landscape. By the decree of the President of Ukraine number 874/2024, dated December 21, 2024, Ms. YULIIA was appointed as the extraordinary and plenipotentiary ambassador of Ukraine to the Republic of the Philippines. And from 2021 to 2024, she was a member of the Supervisory Board of the Ukrainian Institute which is a prominent institution in public and cultural diplomacy fields. Her awards and honors include United Nations Women and the Ukrainian Institute for Women in Arts in 2021 for cultural management. That's it. So let us welcome our dear ambassador, Ms. YULIIA.
Afternoon, everybody. It's for me as Master in International European Law to be today with you and to talk and discuss the issues of humanitarian law, national security, and cybersecurity, especially taking into consideration that we are living in the times of crucial change in the international law. Maybe I'm talking from the perspective of Ukraine, a country which is now facing unprovoked war from the bigger neighbor, Russia. That's why we see how some of the norms of international law does not work in practice. And also we need to be more active in order to maybe redesign or rethink the concept of national security and cybersecurity. Today I want to share with you lessons learned from Ukraine and how we personally and also we as Ukraine see the future of humanitarian law and cyber governance and national security. So the first lesson which we learned as Ukraine is that Russian war against our country proves that humanitarian protection must be redesigned for the age of hybrid, asymmetric, and high-intensified warfare. Russia systematically targets civilians, energy systems, hospitals, schools, and evacuation points, causing over 60,000 civilian deaths and destroying over 270,000 civilian infrastructure facilities from the start of the war, demonstrating that existing protection frameworks fail under deliberate large-scale terror attacks. Also taking into consideration the first days of the Russian full-scale invasion into Ukraine in February 2022, before that day, before February 24, almost all international organizations left Ukraine, including Red Cross and others. So it was the main point. It's good to have international humanitarian organizations working in your country during the peaceful times, but then leaving your country according to their protocols, taking care of their stuff, but leaving your country alone, facing the bigger enemy. I think it was the first start which we faced as a country if the international law and international organizations do really work. And what does it mean, humanitarian law? Because yes, we all need to take care of our people, of our organization as an employer. Yes, all nations and all countries need to take care of their citizens and their national interests. But I think after the Second World War, when we created the United Nations and all international organizations, the whole ecosystem of international law, we were thinking that somebody needs to take care about the universal values and universal interests, which are far beyond the national interest and the people. But in the real moment of invasion, we saw that nobody cares about the universal values. Everybody cares about the interests of the companies, the organizations, or about the national interest, which is also okay, but then we need to reconsider the system of international law. The second lesson was that modern humanitarian protection requires strong air defense and technological capabilities, not only the legal norms. Because when the legal norms do not work and your space or your country is not protected, that the other country who is perpetrator of international law can drop many bombs and drones over your country, and you are not secure. You have nothing to do against it. Taking into consideration the every day of Ukrainians, even now, today, still each night, each day, we face approximately from 200 to 500 bombs daily, launches of massive missile, drone, ballistic, etc., over the Ukrainian cities, and targeting not the military objects, but targeting the civilians, our houses where we live, schools, and kindergartens where our children are going to, hospitals where our people are taking care of the medical stuff, bus stops, train stops, all infrastructure, taking into consideration the energy supply, etc., are targeted by the Russian bombs and missiles. For example, now 90% of Ukrainian cities are living in the dark during the winter time. They have no energy supply. For example, my parents and the parents of my husband living in Kyiv, in the capital city, and in the western cities, Chernivtsi, next to the border with Romania, are in the same situation. They have 2 hours of energy supply per 24 hours. So it's impossible to do anything. So almost all families in Ukraine have the generators, because without the personal generators, you cannot survive, especially during the winter time, where you don't have hot water, etc., etc. So we need to reconsider, having this air defense system to make humanitarian workers work on the ground, because many of them are also afraid to work on the ground, because they can be also targeted, because the Russia does not follow even the rule of war, where the humanitarian workers and the journalists cannot be the target. But no. We have evidence gathered by our prosecutors that Russia targeted hospitals, the Red Cross, vehicles, humanitarian workers, so they do not care. Then who will be the watchdog? Who will make Russia responsible if the other nations and international organizations cannot do this? That's why we need to make some adjustments, how humanitarian protection can be converged with defense technology. The third lesson, hybrid warfare, including cyber attacks, is now a central threat to civilian safety too. Ukraine faces continuous cyber attacks on mobile networks, justice systems, transport infrastructure, and state registries. Russia treats Ukraine as a testing ground, providing that cyber warfare causes humanitarian harm comparable to physical attacks. So it's also the question of cybersecurity and humanitarian security. The first lesson, cyber governance must include strict global rules banning the use of artificial intelligence-powered propaganda and disinformation. When maybe you saw it in the news that Russia decided to invest for the next year, 2026, to increase the investments into the AI tools using for so-called communication strategies as propaganda by 54%, demonstrating that information manipulation is now the formal component of state warfare. And how everything started in Ukraine, the war started with information war, with cyber attacks, and then the troops came on the ground. The fifth lesson, protecting nuclear infrastructure, is an urgent global security priority, because Russia also uses the chantage by occupation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and placing the ammunition on the territory of the nuclear power plant. And from one point of view, we have repeated blackouts, but at the same time, we have militarization of the site. So then, for example, we want to target the Russian troops which are situated on the nuclear power station, then it will be nuclear collapse, which we already went through in 1986 from the Chernobyl. That's why it's also some kind of chantage Russia uses against Ukraine. And also take into consideration the new technologies like drone system, etc. So it's really high risk for the whole population of Ukraine, living not only around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, but also beyond, and also for our neighboring countries. The sixth lesson is that international law must address deliberate attacks on critical civilian infrastructure in the form of state terrorism, because it's what Russia is doing with Ukraine. Russia attacked energy facilities, substation, transport nodes, and grain ports systematically, causing, as for the World Bank and United Nations calculation, over $600 billion in damage as for now for the whole Ukraine, and destabilizing regional and global food and energy security. That's why Ukraine created Grain from Ukraine or Food from Ukraine programs to have the third countries involved to maintain transportation of wheat from Ukraine to our partner countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. The seventh lesson, cyber governance requires coordinated regional air defense and joint interception systems. Drone and missile attacks increasingly spill into NATO and European Union airspace, not only Ukraine. Poland, Romania, Lithuania, Estonia are also now targeted by Russian drones, proving no country can secure airspace alone. Joint interception protocols and regional defense networks are needed. But at the same time, we also understand that each country needs to produce the ammunition internally and have the full production lines internally. Because thanks to globalization, we have interconnection in supplies of crucial minerals, etc. And we have our production lines split between the different countries. But what war in Ukraine, Russian-Ukrainian war has shown it's better to have all production lines inside the country, not to be too dependent on your international partners. It's good to have partners. It's important to have allies. It's how international law is working. But at the same time, you need to be secure for yourself, for your people, to have in-house productions. The eighth lesson, humanitarian protection must account for environmental and cultural destruction, key dimensions of modern conflict. Russia posed immense ecological harm, widespread contamination, and targeted 2,500 cultural infrastructure sites, including UNESCO-protected heritage, so-called Blue Shield heritage sites, amounting to cultural genocide used as a tool of war. So environmental and cultural genocide is also part of war, which is Russia doing on the territory of Ukraine. And it doesn't matter if you have UNESCO shield or not. If you have, for example, in Kyiv, the capital, we have many old churches which survived the First and Second World War, but they do not survive the Russian-Ukrainian war because Russia does not care. Russia called also the eruption of the bigger Ukrainian Kakhovka Dam in the west, and it caused big environmental disaster in the southern part of the state. The management were destroyed because of the water and flooding. So Russia does not care about the environment and culture too. The next lesson, national security today requires resilient defense industries and drone ecosystems. Defense shows there's transformation, as I already mentioned. 95% of frontline drones are domestically produced, with planned output of 20 million drones in 2026, proving that local defense ecosystems are critical for survival and deterrence. Because also Ukraine was too dependent on our allies, but now we understand that we need to produce locally to be secure about our future. Peace and national security must rest on strong international coalitions, not bilateral appeals. The Ukraine Defense Contact Group of 57 countries, 9 capability coalitions, air defense, drones, IT, artillery, maritime, and coordinated procurement frameworks like SAFE will demonstrate a new model of collective security architecture, which should be also not Europe-focused or Indo-Pacific focused, but in these cross-continental coalitions, because as we as Ukraine see, when you rely too much on the bigger countries and Western democracies, sometimes you lose with the like-minded countries who are facing the same challenges as you are. So we as Ukraine believe that middle countries and the countries in transition needs to be more united I need to make the international law working, because many of our big countries who we rely too much on, who were the guarantees of rule-based order, now are questioning this rule-based order, these rules. Decide who should maintain these rules working. I think we, the little countries, who know what does it mean to lose your independence, to lose your territories, and to be questioned as a nation. So I think we need to be more united. That's what Ukraine is also building, the new alliances all over the world. The next lesson, the global community must prevent the internationalization of wars through proxy fighters and weapons plants. Russia used North Korean troops, Iranian drones, and foreign ammunition from multiple countries, and it shows how authoritarian regimes coordinate military, defending global security risks beyond the immediate conflict zone. It's also the question what Ukraine faced in 2022, but even in 2014 when the war actually started. It wasn't 2014. That we have international law, we have rule-based order, but we still are questioning what is right and what is wrong, what is human and what is inhuman. We are all deeply concerned. We are all following the written law, but I think many of us forgot the spirit of law and what stands behind all written convention. And still other nations who are always on the right side of the history, thinking about the international values. But there are many countries who are still reconsidering how to implement the international law, how not only to be deeply concerned, but really act. I think many of you now are also already, professionals and people who are getting the education, and it's good to have a case study. It's good to talk about something in series, but when we as nations are facing the real threats, when we are living in the genocide, having the convention against the genocide, and we still need to wait until we can create a special tribunal and to make the people accountable, the war criminals accountable for the deeds, then I'm questioning myself, what for we need a special convention on genocide that we need to wait until many millions of people will be killed, and then we need to think how to create a special tribunal and how to make the people accountable. I thought that the main difference between the United Nations and the League of Nations was that we finally created a mechanism when we can, thanks to international court and other international legal institutions, intervene when something is wrong, when somebody is questioning the rule-based order, when somebody is killing the dozens and millions of people just because of the national origin. But it seems it does not work. We still need to wait. So the people cannot be secure, the people cannot be protected. That's what Ukraine faced, I was also part of the international organization. I was working for many UN institutions, and I was also questioning the system from inside. Why we are just deeply concerned? Why we cannot name war? We still are considering on the conflict or it's real war, but who then will take this responsibility? We have many courses all over the world, in Ukraine, in Philippines, in the United States, in Russia, about the conflict studies, about the leadership, about the responsibility, accountability, but who really do as it's written and not just, preach it from the academia. I do not see it working. I do not see the real leaders we are taught about who can take the responsibility and who can name the evil and the good. It's still not decided. That's why the next lesson is learned, accountability mechanisms, including the International Criminal Court words and a special tribunal, are crucial deterrents for future conflicts. Lack of punishment fuels escalation. The ICC arrest warrant for Putin and the push for special tribunal address the legal backdrop that allows large-scale war crimes, cyber attacks, and nuclear intimidation to proliferate. What it is, as we in Ukraine see. The next lesson, food security is integral to global stability and humanitarian protection. Russia's attacks on grain ports and agricultural infrastructure also makes us to develop grain from Ukraine or food from Ukraine programs. Also, the future of national security lies in resilient societies, not only strong parties, but also the main lesson from Ukraine, because as you remember from the news, in February 2022, many countries and international organizations were given Ukraine 2-3 days to fail. Because it's when you do this war as symmetric war, it's just mathematics. 143 million people, the biggest army of the world, and then 33 million people, and the small country, it's oblivious who will win. But at the end, thanks to the resilient societies, the horizontal societies, the civil society which exists in Ukraine, we set up the whole people of Ukraine, and it was unique because it was not the army people who confronted Russian soldiers, it was the ordinary people who confronted Russian soldiers. And we saw many pictures in the media, local and international, where the guys with cocktails, molotovs were facing the Russian tanks. There were like human chains made to stop the Russian army, because we knew the difference from the history, from the family stories. I knew it from my grandparents, great-grandparents, my parents, how it is to live under the Russian occupation. That's why many of the different generations of Ukrainians knew that we will not stand up. We will run back to the Soviet Union, where the human being does not matter, where many Ukrainians disappeared from the streets. And now Russia is questioning the existence of Ukrainian state, Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian language. But sorry, who were killing Ukrainians during the centuries because of the language, because of the culture? Russia. So it's crucial to have this ecosystem created within the state nations for the people to own the state and to fight for the state, because state is not something far away. What many of the Ukrainians were told during the Soviet time, that the state is far away. You cannot change anything. You just need to follow the rules which are made for you by somebody. But the people of Ukraine understand that we own the states. We make the rules. We elect the people who represent us. That's why thanks to our president, who were elected by 70% of Ukrainian people, he represented the people of Ukraine, and he knows and he understands that he is accountable and he is responsible for the people of Ukraine. It's what made us resistance to the Russian war, and still makes us to fight back. Hopefully, we will succeed, because it's also a matter of time and fatigue. And last but not least, peace through strength is the only viable strategy against the authoritarian regimes. Russia escalates whenever it senses weakness, while precision strikes, sanctions, international pressures, and strong alliances need to make Russia to sit on the table and negotiate. Because if Russia feels its strength, it will not negotiate with Ukraine. That's why now many you hear from the news about the new plan for peace. But when you go through the plan, it's not about the reciprocity, it's not about the same condition for both countries. It's more about the victim waving the white flag and saying, okay, let it be. That's why, as for now, we as Ukraine and our leadership, we are open for the peace negotiation. We're open to sit and negotiate, but we won't be able just to give up the territory, give up our country. It's not what other people are fighting for. It's not what millions of Ukrainians died for. That's why I want to end my presentation with an open question for all of you. and experts in law, international law, what can we do to make international law work? What are your suggestions for Ukraine, for Philippines, for other like-minded countries? How can we persist? How can we make the big countries who question international law accountable? Maybe we need to change the existing international system. Maybe it's you who can change it. So let's talk today about these issues which we face, Ukraine is living in, and I hope we'll find a solution. Otherwise, I'm questioning the humanity. Thanks to NASA, I got the information from the recent research that this planet has 25 more years to go. If everything will be maintained with the natural disasters, environmental issues, man-made wars and conflicts, this planet will not live longer than till 20, according to NASA's question. So hopefully the next 25 years we will use to maintain our children and grandchildren still have this planet and live peacefully on this planet. It's, I hope, according to leadership series in our hands. So let's be a leader of our lives. Thank you, Pamantasan, for
Wow, that's thought-provoking as it is. Thank you, Your Excellency, for sharing those deeply instructive lessons from the war in your country. Your reflections on resiliency, state responsibility, and human consequences of conflict ground our discussions today as a real-life experience. They remind us that international law is not theory. It is a framework that shapes how nations, militaries, and communities survive and respond in moments of crisis. To continue that important conversation, it's this time from the perspective of humanitarian protection and the rules that govern armed conflict. It is my honor to introduce a panelist whose career reflects an unwavering commitment to safeguarding human dignity in the hardest of circumstances. Attorney CRUZ-FERRER is a distinguished lawyer specializing in international law, particularly international humanitarian law, human rights, and security. She served for more than working closely with the military, the police, and key government agencies to strengthen respect for the rules of war and to protect those most vulnerable in armed conflict. Her work extends deeply into national institutions, having served as a consultant to the Commission on Human Rights, the UNICEF, the Department of Education, the Department of Justice, the AFP, and the PNP. She played a central role in helping these agencies craft their children and in situations of armed conflict protocols, a contribution that continues to shape our national protection frameworks today. She is the author of the book Understanding Rules of War and has written numerous law journal articles on IHL. In the academe, she teaches public international law, constitutional law, human rights law, conflicts of law, and several specialized international law subjects at the Ateneo de Manila Law School, Alilangin University School of Law, and the Polytechnic University of the Philippines. She is also regularly invited MCLE lecturer in international law. Attorney CRUZ-FERRER holds a Juris Doctor degree from the Ateneo de Manila University and 2 master's degrees, including a master's in international studies from the University of the Philippines. She has pursued extensive postgraduate training on international humanitarian law and the law of the sea, including programs in India, South Korea, and Europe, as well as the ICC summer course in Ireland and IHL trainings in San Remo and in the United Nations. In recognition of her exceptional work in advancing international humanitarian law, she was honored in 2022 as an outstanding alumna in OP Montessori. Ladies and gentlemen, we are privileged to learn from her today. Please join me in welcoming Attorney EVECAR CRUZ-FERRER.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. So, can I request briefly if you can move the chair just for this, for the purpose of questions? Just a few slides to demonstrate the point that I would like to highlight. So, for you to be able to read the slides. Thank you. So actually, for this afternoon, I'm actually quite excited to discuss with all of you. In fact, like following from the discussions of our panelists from the armed forces and our ambassador from Ukraine, now I would like to tie them all up together in this particular discussion. So I was asked to just currently globally. Any number? Five. 25. I'm here 100. 10. 8. Okay, so kindly split. I'm sorry, I haven't split. The clicker working. Okay, so as we approach, I mean, at least in 2024, the statistics in 2024, the number is 120. I tried to verify it as well. So other statistics also reflect more than 100, about 120 or so. Now, these armed conflicts, or I mean, at least most notably, you know about the Ukraine-Russia conflict. You know about the Israel and Hamas situation. Of course, us Filipinos, I hope everybody in this room is aware that we are also suffering decades and decades of armed conflict. I mean, you have situations in Africa, okay? Yes, here in Asia. You also have situations in West Asia, in other parts of West Asia. We'd like to call it West Asia instead of the Middle East. So these conflicts are ongoing and has undeniably caused so much human suffering. In fact, do you know what's the current statistics in terms of number of civilian versus, let's say, soldier deaths in armed conflict? Gone are the days that majority of those killed in armed conflicts are soldiers. Okay, but before I go there, let's click the next slide. So that's the question now. Who are the most affected in armed conflict situations? Okay. In past conflicts, if you look at history, generally the soldiers are the most affected. And I'm sure the armed forces of the Philippines are not easily, right? The soldiers are indeed affected by conflict. But nowadays, it's not the case anymore. More and more, the civilians are affected. The current statistics ratio civilian death ratio in armed conflicts is about 8 out of 10. Of those who are killed or wounded in armed conflicts are no longer soldiers, rather they are civilians. Now, why is this? Let's look at the next. Okay. So, anyway, I just wanted to show this, that the UN data shows that there's a surge in civilian deaths in conflicts globally, and I don't think anybody can dispute it. It's a reality in our midst. Next slide.
So here, interestingly, this is from a UN Security Council report, and this was also validated in their 2025 report, that 4 out of 10 civilians killed in conflicts are women, and 3 out of 10 were children. Next. I'd like to focus on this particular part for my discussion. So when we look at conflicts globally, here are the primary challenges that we encounter. First, I mean, there are many challenges, there's no doubt. The talk of Ambassador YULIIA, then pronounced it correctly, YULIIA, showed us a number of issues already in conflicts. But here, I've just chosen a few just to highlight this afternoon. The first one is urban setting. You know, if we read our history books, before conflicts would happen like in jungles or in like open spaces where troops would face one another in the battlefield and just openly confront each other. Gone are the days of those types of conflicts, because more and more the current conflicts are happening where? In urban settings. But in the Philippines, just to bring home a Philippine context, the 2017 Marawi siege happened in the city. Now, what's the problem with urban setting for armed conflicts is that it results to more civilian casualties. There's no doubt about it. If you are in a city, you would have structures, you would have civilians living in this infrastructure. Now, because of this, more and more civilians are being affected by conflicts, and this is further aggravated by the fact of damage to civilian structure, which Ambassador YULIIA also highlighted in her discussion earlier. Now, this effect to civilian infrastructure results to even more deaths. Thereafter, this is what we call the reverberating effects of conflict, and I will demonstrate. You already have an idea how this works, but I'll show you a quick video that would make you understand further the impact of this. Now, before I go to the next point in the primary challenges, can we move to the next slide? Just to show you this quick video. Now, this video is a short one that, well, for me, I've seen it a number of times, but I tend to like look away whenever I watch this because it makes me a bit teary-eyed. Let's click this video. So let's pause the video now. Question for everyone. Assuming that scenario, if the little girl Raya died and did not survive, what do you think is the cause? Is it the wound that she sustained previously, like before going to the hospital? Or is it because the infrastructure where she would have received medical attention was not? Both? If you're just going to choose one. Anyone? Okay, for him it's the lack of the proper facility. For others, is it the one that she already sustained previously? Now, that is a short clip, but it drives home a point. This was also emphasized by Ambassador YULIIA in her discussion. These infrastructures, like civilian structures, are protected under the rules of war. Under IHL, this cannot be targeted, and targeting civilian infrastructure is a violation of the rules of war, and parties should be held accountable. Are you aware that in conflict zones, parties to the conflict are given a map, and these structures, like hospitals, are clearly marked? And this is the reason you have the Red Cross or the Red Crescent, depending on which country we're discussing. You would have the symbol all over the structure and even on the top of the building. That's why it is unacceptable for parties to say that it was an accident, that targeting these structures was an accident. That is not acceptable because these structures are clearly marked. So this video is an example of the reverberating effects of conflict. So it's not just the open bombing or shooting that kills civilians, but also when you target infrastructure like homes, hospitals, schools, you have a direct link also, or it causes further suffering for the civilians and leads to death at certain patients. And this is an example of that. So let's go back previous slide. Okay. So that is one of the challenges we have in today's conflict. So the next one is, I would like to highlight, this is already also mentioned by Ambassador YULIIA in her discussion, asymmetrical warfare. How do you, I'm just curious, like, how do you understand asymmetrical warfare? This is not an invitation, I promise. But it's just a discussion, like, how do you understand asymmetrical conflict? Generally, asymmetrical conflicts is a conflict between parties, and one party is clearly better equipped, or they're not at par with each other. So you call that asymmetrical. Now, the situation of Russia and Ukraine can be considered an asymmetrical one, because one, you have a very powerful armed force, and then you have a smaller country as the other party. Now, what's the difficulty with asymmetrical conflicts? Because it is also associated with proxy war, where you now have a situation where, yes, you have party A and party B fighting, but you now see other countries coming into the picture. So if I just may demonstrate, I beg your indulgence, Ambassador YULIIA, in the situation of Russia and Ukraine, you have Russia being supported also by other countries, despite being already a big country armed force to begin with. And you now have on the side of Ukraine other countries as well. And this creates a very delicate and sometimes complex situation. And it causes impacts beyond the border of the current conflict. Now you can see Russia doing these incursions in the airspace of other European countries in relation to this conflict. Now, when you have asymmetrical warfare, and this is prevalent in different parts of the world, it causes further effects to civilians. It causes deaths and further suffering of civilians. Next slide. Okay, next. So I'd like to end with the following conclusion. First, international humanitarian law, or the rules of war, is important since it seeks to limit the effects of armed conflict. With IHL, we're not saying that no one's going to get killed or wounded in armed conflict. Rather, IHL aims to mitigate the effects of armed conflict. And then it protects those who are not involved in the fightings, that would be the civilians, of course, the sick, and as well as the wounded soldiers. And then this, I need to emphasize, that all parties to the conflict have the duty to respect IHL. It doesn't matter to IHL, I mean, for IHL, it doesn't matter who's at fault. We're not discussing who started the conflict, who's the victim here, what IHL is saying, irrespective of the reasons you are fighting, it directs parties to respect the rules of war. Both parties, all parties, need to adhere to the rules. And then, I'm looking forward to this discussion later. So I end my presentation. Thank you.
Why you would like to our audience to why do you like to call Attorney Balosa from our international development? What are you doing? So while we're trying to facilitate, you may take food, what are they? And then, actually, though we're in pursuit of our objective to keep this symposium orderly as possible, we have assigned the effort. However, due to the interconnection, siguro there might be some delay. However, but despite that, there were already raised questions coming from classmates and some of the spectators of our Zoom. But definitely, there are lots of reactions. But most reactions are just emotional reactions. But very few written reactions. Anyways, the very first question raised, if you may, well, in consideration of the since it's already time for I think we can have a short break first, and so they can have a life for a while, and then you can also enjoy the shared. I don't know. We'll have a 10-minute break. And everybody from Taklaro will make the presentation.
Anong jacket? Ano ba? Naka-GG yung ano? Ano na lang?
Kinabahan kami kasi parang gusto ko siya.
Sir, natamaan ako. Kasi, boss, natamaan ako. Matatamaan ako. Yeah, pwede. Pwede, sige, okay na, pwede. Opo, opo. Ito ibata ko na lang sa audience. Ito lang ibabata ko na lang sa audience.
Baka gumagawa lang sila ng ano ng ego.
Ito yung ibato. Teka lang. Sandali, boss. Kuhan ko muna. Pandarin ko muna yan.
Ako maliit na click mo na ito. Pero wala ka pwede rin ba?
Mahaba. Yung lang hindi magalaw. Apo. Apo. Pwede.
Ilang minutes at delay?
Okay. First question, it came from the group of Cardinals, our guest from the report. First question, what is the governing body that will decide on the actions of Russia? Follow up, what are the efforts exerted by this body to subdue or at the very least lessen Russia's abuse of power? Do we fight them head on or legally? So we will hear from the family. Ilan kita mention?
To be clarified, the question has to be clarified on what particular aspect, what body, or is or he referring? Is it about the legal aspect? Is it?
Actually, the very much of the question is in case there are resistance from Russia, what's the record? Or who's the body what body will take the record? Whether we fight them or head on or legally. That's the question. I think get the clarify the question.
Good afternoon, everyone, and privately, well, ladies and gentlemen. So, Ambassador Yulia mentioned earlier that Russia's abuse of power is extensive, and that we know how many or how vast the abuse of power is. So, I just wanted to know why have there no consequences regarding this, and what governing body must throw or what governing body should penalize them for their actions and their abuse of power.
So, from one point of view, we have the order of ICC, but Putin does not travel to the countries which have signatures of the legal frame, and that's why he is not taken hostage. So it's also the question if he will or not. Even now, when the negotiation about which country will be the country where the next peace negotiation will be happening at the presidential level, there are also many questions. If it will be one of the country's signatures, ICC, will they take then Putin and make him accountable or not? Then if the peace negotiation will happen or not. So from one point of view, we have the law working, but the other point of view, in reality, not. Secondly, Ukraine, together with our European allies, more than 30 countries already signed the special decree on creation of special tribunal, thanks to Council of Europe. And this special tribunal will be dedicated to prosecute and to analyze all evidence of war crimes committed by the Russian military and political leadership. So hopefully the special tribunal will be the place where Putin and other Russians who are responsible for the war crimes will be accountable for it. So we, as Ukraine and our allies, are doing everything possible using the existing rule of law to make Russia accountable. But still, it's not about the majority of countries joining this initiative, and also not having its consequences right away. That's why during my speech I was mentioning that still having all the legal bases, conventions and international institutions, we still need to wait until the majority of people will lose their lives, until the final decision on peace will be made, when the people who committed the crimes will be accountable. So how we can all together to work on not making this war or 120 plus conflicts happening, and work in advance than work with consequences. So now we are still working with consequences. So, but how we can, make it impossible that one country or one regime will think twice to start the conflict or war, because he or she will be knowing that their accountability will be high and right away, and not after 20 or 30 years, when maybe these people will be already dead, or will be commit suicide, as we know from the history who has done this, and not accountable for all crimes they committed. So it's my more diplomatic perspective, but I will be happy to hear the lawyers are talking about this.
Actually, I'd like to highlight the reason I asked that particular aspect. I'd like everybody to understand that the law doesn't operate in a vacuum. I mean, there will always be, yes, we can discuss about the legal aspects. I mean, 24 hours, but ultimately we have to accept that there will be an intersection between law and politics. And as Ambassador YULIIA just mentioned, yes, we have all this legal institutions, you have the ICC, special tribunals can be established and such, but the question is, who will be strong enough to actually apprehend? Would any country, let's say, should he go to a particular country that's party to the Rome Statute, actually apprehend him and start a conflict with Russia? So these are challenges, real challenges that we need to find answers to. So it's going to be difficult, but I agree with Ambassador Lee that something has to be done. You have to hold those who violate international law accountable. Because if not, then the order in the international system will really be affected. The thinking of Maynila, one. Maynila is under the control of Russia now, but it's the land. I mean, it's part of it. So sovereignty can't be forced anymore. I mean, gone are the days international doesn't allow like forcible taking of land, and then all of a sudden it's now your part of your country. That's no longer allowed. So it's important that international be implemented, and those who violate held responsible. So the challenge is, how do we now balance between law and politics to achieve a solution to this situation?
Ma'am, to follow up on my question, thank you, ma'am. So a part of your speech, you mentioned that there is a lack of punishment for the Russia. So in the context of, per se, Israel and Palestine and Ukraine and Russia's ongoing war, do you think that the laws of the ICC and other international bodies are per se, for the lack of a better word, useless?
I think that they are not useless because we still have some order. Without having these norms, we will all end up living in the chaos. And I think chaos is always worse than the bad order. But I think those institutions were created in the 20th century, taking into consideration the realities of the 20th century. But we are living already in the 21st century with the new challenges facing. Then I think we, the new generation, needs to sit and reconsider the existing rule of order and the existing international system of law, and maybe to revise or rewrite some norms which are not anymore applicable, taking into consideration new technologies, AI, others, proxy wars, asymmetric wars, as so like, you know, that I think it's good that we have it, but we need to rewrite and rethink and redesign.
Okay, ma'am. So, I'm sorry, I do have a lot of questions because I'm very open to learning regarding international law, ma'am. So for this question, this is for Attorney Ekan. So in the question of ethical consideration with regards to international law, what if there is a conflict between international law and the country's laws and beliefs?
But I'd like to weigh in first on the question you asked earlier. That are these institutions, for example, like the ICC, is it even effective? That's the question, considering what the situation we are facing at present in the international community. I think everybody needs to understand, as I've mentioned earlier, international law plays a specific role. It brings order in the international system. But as with other laws, like even here in our country or in any other country, you can't have a 100% implementation. There's no perfect implementation for any law. Now, international is not useless. It's there to create a semblance of order, or else it will be anarchy in the international system. So, international law provides some semblance of order, but again, implementation is not perfect because we need to contend with politics. You really need to contend with politics. When you deal with states, you cannot isolate politics out, you cannot remove it out of the equation. It will always be part. Now, the challenge for those, for lawyers, is really to understand that this is the reality. And now we find creative ways in order to find solution to these present problems, bringing together realizations of politics, what's the legal framework they're working with, adjust the legal framework if there's a need to adjust the outdated ones, and really just try our utmost to come up with solutions that address the problem. Now, the next question is about.
So, ma'am, the next question. In the question of ethical consideration.
If there's a challenge between international law and domestic law. Now, under international law, there's the doctrine, Latin doctrine like pacta sunt servanda. So, pacta sunt servanda simply means that if you enter into an agreement, states have to abide in good faith. Okay? Now, with this particular doctrine, if the Philippines enters into an international agreement, the Philippines is found to abide in good faith. Now, if there is a conflict, generally, the Philippines, what it does, when it enters into a treaty or a convention, what it does is that when it reaches the Philippines, we try to now see if we have domestic laws that would conflict with this treaty that we should sign. And if there is, even before ratification, what the country does is try to adjust the laws that would be in conflict, how we are able to abide by this particular treaty or convention. If not, the Philippines can opt not to ratify. Okay? Because signing into a treaty doesn't necessarily mean that we need to ratify the same. So we can always not ratify, but of course we shouldn't do acts that would be in contravention of this thing.
Okay, ma'am. So for my last question.
Nalito ka na ba? So, like I'm sure for the lawyers, they would remember this doctrine in international.
So, for my last question, regarding your conclusion a while ago, your presentation, you said that regardless of who is in the right and who is in the wrong, both parties must respect the international humanitarian law. In the case of terrorism groups, who do not know or who do not understand and who do not respect the doctrine of the IHL, how do we consider that? Or since they do not know IHL, ma'am, are we going to punish one side or both of them?
Generally, IHL, I'd like to clarify this as much as possible. Doesn't use the words like terrorists. Terrorism can be committed in the context of an armed conflict, but generally, if you're finished using the word terrorist, why? Terrorist, when you call a group a terrorist, it's a political leader. Right? Who defines who a terrorist group is? It's a state, right? We decide to call a group a terrorist. So what IHL does, since it's the rules relating to armed conflict, what it tries to do is just identify this as a party to a conflict without labeling them as a terrorist. Because you've heard the line. Have you heard of this saying? One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. So one group is called a terrorist. It's a political leader. Now, if we insist on this particular terms being utilized, it models the discussion. Are you now saying that if you call a group terrorist, they no longer have the duty to abide by the rules of war? Because you're calling them common criminals. So what's the incentive for them to abide by the rules of war? So the better way of discussing this is we call them as parties to the conflict. Now, assuming that they are, let's say, parties to the conflict, they are bound to comply with the rules of war. Now, you mentioned earlier, like, they don't know, you said, ma'am, but they don't know IHL. And this is the reason it is being violated. There was a study conducted, for the information of everyone, there was a study conducted previously, and the armed forces of the Philippines, in fact, participated in this very good study. It was a study done by the ICRC, so it was updated in 2019 or 2018. So in this study, ICRC tried to understand why, despite knowing the rules of war, violations are still happening. So the title of the study, Rules of Behavior in War. Now, it made a study among armed forces and also non-state armed groups. There were only two armed forces that participated in this study. One is the Australian Armed Forces, and the other one is the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Now, armed groups were also studied. So in this particular study, they found out a number of factors that play in the picture for violations. It's not just about not knowing the war, the rules of war, but also the pressure that comes with your peers. And the fact that you're dealing with individuals. You're not dealing with robots, right? So violations can happen for a variety of reasons, and it's not just about being ignorant about the rules of war. So terrorism, it's part of life, but I would encourage that this term is not really utilized because it is political.
Thank you.
Sorry for the long-winded explanation, but the question is a bit complex.
Actually, as I said, it brings me back to my exam. Where there were a lot of political, public international questions. And what they do are the two principles, Pakatin Serban and Rebel Stability. No matter what the question is, I always direct my answer to the Pakatin Serban. I got the highest grade.
I have a question for the panel. When listening to your discussion a while ago, we now recognize that there is a hybrid warfare where lawfare, the use of law, and information campaigns, cyber attacks, feed the battle space as much as kinetic operations. It's no longer physical. How should international evolve so that humanitarian protections are preserved while enabling the states individually to defend themselves without diplomatic overreach or so interplay of the kinetic, the armed forces, diplomatic, and IT.
Thank you, Attorney. So, probably as experienced by our armed forces here in the Philippines, a lot of things change with regards to what might be local but decided, but might be non-physical but armed physical. So when you talk about ramming of land vessels, laser pointing a bridge of a great ship, you then probably term it as something physical but not armed. Now your reference for laws of armed conflict are black and white. Armed, target, are verified and verified. Defeat the enemy. Now when everything from black and white turns into gray, that's how law needs to be followed. Because law as well as diplomacy enables success. And if I go back to the question of I will be the law and diplomacy are also used as to support. It's how you package an unlawful act in a way that it brings about information. And all sides, that's it. And normally when you ask how do you impose a rule upon somebody who breaks the rules, you have to wait to win. Your war crimes progress against Japan. Your war crimes progress against Germany. Were able to look at it because they lost. That's how you impose rules based on history of war. But other than that, most of the time you cannot impose rules on the people. And that is a problem today because normally there's not any complete military victory. Allow me to share this with military victories or parts of support
My perception is the following, that, it was once said that if you want to live in peace, prepare yourself to the war. But I think many of the old and young democracies all over the world were so relaxed after the Second World War that they really believed in the peace as a constant. You maybe all remember the famous book of Francis Fukuyama and of the history. So they were preparing themselves to the peace. But many authoritarian regimes, vice versa, they were preparing themselves to the new kind of war. That's why now we live in 100 plus conflicts all over the world and not a big war, because everybody was expecting that the Third World War will be like the first and second, but it's not. It's proxy wars, and maybe it's already happening, but in new dimensions. What we as Ukrainians believe in order to restore the peace and to build a new order, we need to have more statesmen as politicians, because politicians are thinking in the syllabus of the political cycles. They're interested in winning the elections. That's why they do not see long-term how the country will develop. The countrymen see through the historical lens what they are doing today, because they know that maybe in 4 or 5 years after the political cycle will end, they will leave, but the children, the grandchildren, and they themselves will still live in the state. That's why they are interested in working for the longer perspective. Secondly, we need more citizens than the ordinary people, because ordinary people do not trust in the state. They think that politicians are far away, somebody else needs to make decisions for them. They just are ordinary people. They cannot influence what is going on. That's what we heard from Russia. It's a Putin war. It's not the Russian war. Then I'm questioning 143 million minus one. They are not responsible, yes? So they are just ordinary people. They just want to live a normal lives. But citizens, they are people who care, who believe that they can influence the situation. They can go out into the streets and just they took away the votes they have given to the person who represents them on the national, international level. It's actually the main difference between Ukrainians and Russians, that Ukrainians always had the feeling that they own the state. We didn't believe in this hierarchical system. We have also internal jokes that many of Ukrainian presidents were made more patriotic after the election than before the election because the people of Ukraine made them. And the last but not least, unfortunately, we as democracies need to prepare ourselves to the war. We need to invest in ammunition, we need to invest in national security, and we need to see national security as an ecosystem of different domains, because sometimes we undervalue culture and cultural politics, public diplomacy, and information and strategic communication, because we think that war and national security is only about the army. So let's invest only in the armed forces. But the new reality is not about this. Russian war against Ukraine is first of all the war for identity. It's about questioning the nation, the country, etc. That's why it has a broader perspective. So when we talk about the public policy, when we talk about the politics, we need to talk about the ecosystematic approach and to invest as a state in all domains, in culture, in education, etc. Because propaganda is also less of critical thinking. But when we do not invest in education and we invest only in infrastructure, in the hard and not soft projects, and then we are wondering why people are falling for propaganda, why they are like spreading the fake news. But it's also about the education, about the culture, about the working on the people who live in the country. So I think that these three domains need to be developed, like more statesmen, more citizens, and more ecosystematic approaches to the policy making in each of our countries.
So your question was, and if I understood your question correctly, you were asking whether international is able to evolve with the changing, situation in the international community. I have to say it is not evolving as fast as it should. I mean, there have been developments in the past few decades and years. You can see the law evolving relating to cyber attacks. So it recognizes that wars are no longer just kinetic, like the usual concept of just shooting or targeting someone. It can be done now through cyber attacks, which is becoming more and more frequent. Likewise, I think Ambassador YULIIA also mentioned earlier about disinformation. Right? It's being used by many countries. In fact, because we already recognize the fifth domain of warfare, which is cognitive warfare. So cognitive warfare, because you have the land, the sea, the air, then you have the cyber, right? But the next phase is really cognitive warfare. It's really targeting the minds of the population you want to affect. So that's now the challenge. And how do you do this? Through social media, different platforms. Now the deep fakes are so hard to spot. Like a video that you think is so legitimate and that it's the actual person, it could be a deep fake. So this is something that we need to look out for. The international community acknowledges this reality, but as with any law, it takes a while before it will catch up with the field realities. Maybe I can just give a reason just for many of you to understand why it's difficult to come up with laws, because treaties and conventions are so hard to negotiate. Why? Because when you negotiate a treaty or convention, you're asking a state to abandon its national interest in favor of the common good. And that's not always easy to do. Let's say if you want to ban a certain weapon, and this particular state manufactures that weapon, would I agree to that? And this would mean lost income for my country. So these are the challenges that confronts coming up with new laws or agreements to benefit the international.
From the military side also, law prohibits or also prohibits our end. It prohibits and posits our ways and means. Now you have to analyze with regards to the evolution of law that would allow accountability and certain things because of its regulations. You also have to consider who is the author inside. Because in both ways, they will use law for whatever. So if my big brother at the upper north trying to develop his domestic law, I'm sure it's going to be for my other big brother at the other Pacific. And he tried to also review when both sides will clash, which becomes, there's a shift between the respondent system going to the respondent. If brother upstairs promotes anything that is sensitive, how do we improve something? So that those are the things that are really out there. Change the way we
Thank you for those very insightful comments and answers. With those answers, I'll go to my next and final point. Considering the challenges that we have and that international law necessitates updating or catching up, considering the complexities that we have right now, with the limitation of diplomatic or political and even military or national defense. How should we then redesign the architecture of collective security, taking into account diplomacy, military, and humanitarian, so that we can respond effectively to these realities that we have? And if we can even bring it.
I was already smiling when you were asking that because if we know the answer, I don't think it will be our situation. Because I mean, to be perfectly honest, I don't know how it can be redesigned. I think seriously needs to be undertaken in order to determine how to redesign, because there are so many factors that can benefit. I mean, the Israel-Palestine situation is ongoing for decades, and there's no real solution. Despite all the studies being conducted, what's the solution? That was the same proposal and all, but you see, up to now, it's still happening. And we are currently waiting to see how this will really evolve and whether this ceasefire will hold and the peace process will be can only look in right. So, really, I'm so sorry how I wish, but I think it's the question also in the minds of many analysts, many lawyers, more for the political analysts, not to navigate it.
Yeah, maybe we just need also to open the space for creativity. And we have so many startups when we talk about IT and economics, but I have never seen the startups in political or social science or legal science. So maybe we just need to open our minds to think out of the box, not only for the industries which are known being creative, but also for the industries which are known to be classic and stable, because still, when we all studied history, and also history is built on the heroes. Yes, on somebody who stood up, made a decision, and changed the way how it was. So are we really so plain now in 21st century that do we really don't have like the real new faces, new minds who can solve these complex issues? I still truly believe that we have, maybe we don't see them or we do not give them possibility to propose the new way of thinking, because as I said previously, if we will not find the solution, the end game will be for all of us. And I think what many people who bear the beasts in them, they do not get. It was always my question as Ukrainian, like what for? The main question. We are all human beings who are living on this earth maximum 100 years, who are too lucky, but generally it's like 60, 80, especially in our part of the world. But why many of us use this short period of time to earn so much money as nobody can spend during a lifetime, or to take with you so many human lives when you leave this earth? Maybe it's like more utopic and I don't know, some questions which are raised, but still, I don't get it. But still we have many people who are living in the conflicts which cannot be solved, like yes, Israel and Palestine. Actually, when we take Ukraine and Russia, it's not our first war. When we learn the history, it's 25th or 24th Russian-Ukrainian war in different domains, in different roles which we have. But still, we cannot take away each other geographically. We still are neighbors. We still have more than 1,000 kilometers joint border. Do we really want, I'm questioning our neighbor, live in war, constant war, and constant questioning each other? Maybe finally somebody needs to be accountable. And we are going back to this question of accountability in the international order. How to make people accountable. Actually, Russia has never been accountable for all it did during the history. We just talked about the accountability, and yes, it was the main question which we also put on the table, creating the special tribunal, etc. In order to be accountable, you need to lose. But if it's asymmetrical war, how? We will not be entering Moscow as it was with Berlin, Tokyo, and others. So, it's the new way of war. So how then we will see that Russia lose this war? Or we are talking about human rights. We have declaration of human rights. We are now talking that everybody needs to stand with the victim. But in the international law, we are still victimizing everybody and saying, no, victim, the weaker one should stood away and just give up. So it's like too many questions. And I totally agree with colleagues that if we will know the answers, we will not sit here and discuss. We will just enjoy our lives outside, and then talking about the issues how to save this planet and not how to save the life of one person, which we are not talking about, because people are, we are talking about the numbers, but they are like not numbers. They are like thousands of thousands, hundreds of thousands people fight. Which just, like we, our generation, understand that we do not have normal life.
So, we try to craft military operations in accordance with the law. We do operations that promotes the law. In a way, what we're doing every day is being done to attain peace. So whether the question really was, why do we want to have this collective thing or try to address so many issues in the world, it's because probably the main reason is because we want peace. There will always be difficulties when, if you look at history, the World War II, you had a bipolar world and then a unipolar world, and then it's now being challenged by a rising regime. Because there was always dissatisfaction from one party versus that party. That one party is doing. If a country has a manifest destiny as supported by their values way back to be the number one country in the world, to be the source of leadership among all others, it doesn't follow that other countries. But if they also continue to impose it on other countries who don't accept it, and then brand them as something otherwise, contrary to the greater Western perspective, definitely you will have problems in the world order. So whenever it is challenged, there will always be an effort to always go back to that manifest destiny. At the same time, when you have a former Middle Kingdom, wherein everything revolved around them before, wants to aspire to this grand rejuvenation of the going back to the Middle Kingdom, they cannot also just show it as a peaceful rise because there is a constant effort from one side to at least contain them, viewing them as a threat. So who do you believe? What side do you read? So whenever we try to interpret something, just like you, the law, you always have to look at all sides. Because if you look at the other party, who eventually dissolved his union back in 1991, they have a different story. If you go back to the next country that they are beside with, they also have a different story. So you really, it's complex. From a military strategy standpoint, I always look at things in terms of systems thinking. I can model in my mind what might be the central problem. And that is what you need to look at as you continue to evolve in coming up with applicable rules. What is the problem you are trying to solve? Thank you.
Sorry, considering that the panel stated a while ago that we cannot, or it's not possible to redefine it. My question is, what then can you give us the one that academic doing theses, dissertation on shaping of advancing future-ready legal framework? If we cannot redesign, what then can IHL give us as a working ingredient so that we can come up, maybe, hopefully, something that may or may not solve our current problems, also in diplomacy and in military. And that's really my final question. Sorry.
Actually, I'm not saying that it's impossible to redesign. I mean, please, I'd like to correct that if that's the impression that I get. I'm not saying it is impossible, but it is really challenging. And it cannot be, to be honest, it takes like serious like studies in order for you to come up with this one solution to the situation we're in. Now, what can students contribute? To be honest, it plays a role. Like, for example, law students in the Philippines taking Juris Doctor degree are required to come up with thesis. those taking up Masters of Law will come up with thesis. Now, this thesis will help, come up with possible solutions to the different gray areas or gaps or challenges in the current legal framework. So that is the role that we're going to play. Like, for example, I have student advisories, which there are students like who focus on IHL, their topics, so they look at the various gaps and issues related to IHL and they focus on one. By doing this, you are able to contribute in the development of law. So by pondering on these issues, you create proposals, you create suggestions as to how to address it. And this is the contribution. It all starts from this idea. But it takes serious studies, and this is the reason students of Masters of Law and Juris Doctor can contribute in this manner. When you start really thinking about the problem, designing possible solutions, this may not be the perfect solution, but it is the starting point. It all starts from an idea, and later on, it becomes developed. And then, for example, here in the Philippines, you have so many IHL issues. So if you focus on one, this is shared, let's say, with other institutions, and then we try to work on this and transit, and ultimately, it becomes part of the solution to this big problem. So for me, that is the contribution that we can bring to the country and the global community.
I have been studying law, and my parents are doctors, so I was always questioning if I choose the right profession, because you can see the results of my parents' work right away, because they heal human bodies. But, the results of our work as lawyers, you cannot see right away. But then I found, I don't remember the name of the author, but it was written that the lawyers or the people in legal studies, they are like doctors, but they cure not human bodies, but human souls. So I really liked it, because it was an explanation that my work will matter. So I just want to ask you all just to try to change the people's soul. Yeah, I don't know, maybe it's to topic 2, but just change the people's lives, because we lawyers can change the people's lives. We can help them, yes? And if you change even the life of one person, then, if each of us will change the life of one person, then this world will be a better place to be. It's more generic and more practical, just dig deeper, always dig deeper. As panelists today mentioned, just see the broader picture, gather the data, base your decisions on data you receive. Then develop your critical thinking, question yourself, question everything you see, you watch, you hear. And then if we will work back on ourselves and will change the people and the environment around us, I still hope that solution will come by itself. Because those who are working on themselves, they will find solution. And finger crossed, maybe in this hall are sitting people who will change our lives for better. So let's do it all together. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to request that this will be my last answer to give. So probably if you could look into the common application of an integrated rules of engagement. What's happening in the West Philippine Sea is not a West Philippine Sea issue. It is a regional problem that requires a regional solution. Now, if there will be a common application of a response to these illegal, coercive, aggressive, deceptive activities, then probably the molding of the rules of engagement as well as the development of that code of conduct that would have unit defense would be responsive to the situation. What I'm saying is, when the bully rams the Japanese rams him back, it's a different response covered by a different ROE are normally based on a country's culture, its capability, it's having a professor to put on, it's dependent. So, we who are recipients of this iconic or that's how we can only apply common and uniform responses to what we are doing. It probably becomes because they can do it as they please to whoever is unable to respond to the way that the other zoners countries respond. So if we could develop that ROE, because that is something that I have been asking from the bilateral and multilateral partners for the past 2 years. We have to develop a common ROE for this particular area. So it's a good study that it will take into us. So, Doctor, maraming salamat. Panel members for the chance to be with you.
Actually, General, I have a question and I was hoping you could perhaps just answer a question that is perhaps, sir, somehow related also to our topic. As we are gathered together, this pertains to war, law, security, and innovation. But war is not just for the state, it also happens at home. So my question, General, you will be the first answer. Sir, my apologies, I'm just so happy seeing a greater general in our school. And every attorney, ma'am, and your excellency will also be answering. My question, sir, is, number one, if you are amenable with divorce. Because war does not just happen among the state, it also happen inside the family dwelling. And second is whether you are amenable to decriminalizing adultery and concubinage. Because I am a practicing lawyer in around 50 kilometers away from Manila. I am a litigator. I also handle normally criminal law. Most of my cases are criminal law. So, because there is a saying that sometimes after you got married, they say that they found their true love at the wrong time. And they know that they knew inside, they will never have each other for a long time. And sometimes also there is a realization, ma'am, sirs, that sometimes it is sad to belong to someone else when the right one comes along. That's two questions, even though this is not to be answered legally, but based on your opinion, because in Korea, and in some other countries, adultery and concubinage has now been declared non-criminal. It is now civil obligation. So, pardon my question, General Sir, but I hope for a while your departure. Sir, what is your opinion on this, sir?
So, sir, my answer is no to both. Really no to both of them. I understood very well the difference of position and interest. So, whenever I have an argument with my wife, my position is to let her win. You know why? She feels happy that she won. But at the end of the day, it was me who won. because I still have her with me. That's the interest. The position might have been subordinate as it should. My primary interest is to keep her with me. So I can lose the argument, but I won the war.
Amen.
After we
have to and very important action to fulfill. So, sorry, Attorney Elmo. So, to simplify and to award the certificate of recognition, Brigadier General Fernandez, we may call it our dynamic professor. The certificate of recognition is awarded to Brigadier General Francisco Domingo R. Fernandez in sincere gratitude and acknowledgement of his invaluable time and effort and expertise extended as a resource speaker in the conference organized by the Master of Laws class on International Laws and Development titled Law, Security, and Innovation Advancing Future-Ready Legal Frameworks, given this 22nd day of November 22, 2025, at nakatipunan lang sa ating Ejercito Estrada, Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila, being campus in the Muros, Manila, Philippines. Signed by our very hardworking class leader, Judge Divina A. Perdiguera, the chairperson of our steering committee, and of course, by Dr. Alexandra P. Albenico, Law Development.
We would like also have a certificate given to the, we'll have the picture taken with, the qualification.
Thank you. Okay, very good enough. We will now resume the awarding of the we will now resume the remaining minutes of the panel discussion. For our dear ambassador and attorney EVECAR. A while ago, Attorney Elmo Lopez, Elmo Cortez, you have a question po.
Kasi, sabi nila, they said that war is inevitable now because of aggressive maneuvering ng China against Philippine Coast Guard and Philippine fishermen. And my question is, last month, I believe AFP Chief of Staff General Bronner mentioned that yung missile base ng Pilipinas can reach China. I'm just thinking if the Philippines or the China will declare a war, if the Philippines have a fighting chance to win against China, because in my personal perspective, parang we still don't have that technological capabilities to engage into a war against those countries. But I still humbly believe yung Filipino soldiers, when it comes to skills, tactics, strategies, discipline, intelligence, we are world class. But in terms of technological warfare, I believe parang hindi pa. So, what will be your take on the statement of General Browner that missile-based Philippines can reach China?
Actually, when you talk about armed conflict, for the benefit of of Ambassador YULIIA, he's asking about a statement made by the AFP Chief of Staff that themselves, Philippines has themselves against China, and what is the possibility of us winning a conflict with China. To be honest, the situation in the West Philippine Sea remains a tension. It's not an armed conflict. And I think parties would like to keep it that way. No country would just engage in armed conflict without considering the repercussion that comes with armed conflict. Because armed conflict is not just about the battle, let's say, in the water, or just one armed force going after the other. It has repercussions for the state in terms of economy, okay, the well-being of the people, all aspects will be affected, okay, when we go into war. Now, this as to who will win, of course, it depends on a variety of factors. There will be, as I mentioned, the interaction of politics into the equation. We need to factor the strength and numbers of the different armed forces, and also the capability of each armed force to win a war in the water, because it's not your common land warfare. So it's not just about missiles reaching a particular country. A number of factors need to be considered who will win a particular conflict. Now, with asymmetric warfare, as we can see in various conflicts around the world, and this is the reason I forgot to mention during my presentation that the reason more civilians get affected, because in asymmetric conflict, parties use different tactics in order to somehow find a balance in the asymmetry Diba? I'll say this in Filipino, kung mas malaki at mas malakas ang kalaban mo, hindi ka makikipaglaban ng harapan. Kasi hindi ka mananalo sa harapang labanan, right? So you can see this, just an example, in the 9/11 situation. You know that they can't win against US if it's an open confrontation. So what did the other party do? The 9/11 attack. It was overt, it was unexpected, and it delivered a hit. So it's a very difficult situation when the West Philippines. And of course, we hope that it does not escalate into a situation of full-blown war if diplomatic channels can still be available.
Sabi kasi nila, during peacetime, you need to prepare for war. So, what do you think, ma'am, would be, considering the available resources that the Philippines have right now, what reforms, legally or anything, that we can make to enhance our fighting chance with the bullying country?
I think the Philippines has been, the armed forces has been undergoing modernization in the last few years, I mean, the past decade. So it's a good thing that we are modernizing. But in winning a situation or dealing with a tension with another party, it's not just about the armed force. As I mentioned earlier, I think we need to consider all diplomatic avenues and also creative solutions to the problem. Because going toe-to-toe with one country, even if you're a big country, you're bound to suffer a economic downturn because of it. And we can also see this happening with Russia. Their economy is undeniably affected by going into this conflict. Now, for me, it's really a combination of diplomacy, of ensuring that, of course, your armed forces will, should the war happen despite all efforts. And also, what other mechanisms you can put in place that should a conflict happen, it can deal with the effects of such war.
By the way, I'm against war. Just an hypothetical.
Sure, that was still a lot of questions, but we find these questions as related to the earlier discussions. And so we will now have the last question. What if terrorism and war are combined in a certain situation? What laws will apply? And the follow-up question, who caused the shot to secure civilians from a war? Do we have a scheme of removing them from our country?
So the first question is what
if terrorism and war are combined in a certain situation?
What happens?
What laws will apply?
Okay, terrorism, as I mentioned earlier, can happen in a context of armed conflict. What I was defining earlier, that generally I told the use is the word terrorist. With the labeling of conflict as a terrorist. So terrorism can happen in the context of armed conflict. If it does happen in the context of armed conflict, we still apply international law. It's the same provision applies. Now, in a situation of armed conflict, both IH and human rights equally apply. Because human rights is very much still applicable, even if it is in a conflict situation. It's just that for purposes of the parties, it's really international humanitarian. So the other, I don't know what you want.
Follow question, ma'am, is who caused the shot to secure civilians from a war? Do we have a scheme of removing them from our country?
It's really the country. It's really the country who has a call as to how to remove the civilians in harm's way. But the sad reality is, as I mentioned earlier, civilians are getting the brunt of the conflicts because the way wars are being waged right now is so different from like the past like decades and years ago. Now we see AI technologies being utilized, we see cyber attacks, we see drones attacks, autonomous weapon systems. I mean, it's a reality now. Like, it has been documented in many UN reports that autonomous drones are able to deal with conflicting parties, and also you have the suicide attacks. You have this asymmetric warfare where parties use surprise attacks and bombings in order to deal with a stronger adversary. It's the country's call as to how to evaluate it. I think.
Yeah, I just can echo what was already said, because when the party who started the war does not follow IHL, then everything what is prescribed does not matter. You know, because in Ukraine we created the humanitarian corridors for civilians to leave the occupied territories by Russia back to Ukraine. But Russia, thanks to the drones and other systems, they just targeted the humanitarian corridors. Or they created filtration camps for people to leave the occupied territories to Ukraine, and some of the people, they didn't manage to go to the filtration camp. And they just lost their lives, or they were taken by force by Russians and took into the hostage of the territory of Russia. So you have the rules, you can follow them. Some percentage of people will be saved, but still it's always about two parties following the rules. And still, it's not true what we experienced in Ukraine.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the available for sharing the insights, and of course the reactors who provide your questions to pave the way for the insight coming from families. And with that, with a deeper understanding, I think it renders the requirement of Progressive Journal motivated.
Before we conclude, I would like to So first, I would like to introduce the Center for Global Non-Killing, or CGNK. So CGNK is an international organization with UN Special Consultative status. I am currently the Chief Advocacy Officer and Director for the Philippines, succeeding the late Dr. Jose Abueva, a political scientist and former president of the University of the Philippines. I can never replace him. Second, I would share my reflections on this segment. So founded in 1988 in Honolulu by Dr. Glenn Page, Center for Global Non-Killing began as the Center for Global Nonviolence Planning Project. In 2007, it transitioned into the Center for Global Non-Killing, refining its mission toward a world without killing. Today, Center for Global Non-Killing operates globally through research, education, and academia, building networks and advising institutions and embedding non-killing principles into policy. With special consultative status at the United Nations Economic and Social Council, CGNK affirms a powerful truth. A killing-free world is not just a dream. It is an attainable reality through creativity, collaboration, and strategic action. Moving on,
to my reflections or thoughts in this seminar, recently, I think 2 days or 3 days ago, I was asked about my thoughts on the current state of our country. In response, Dr. Kuchapin, also the Associate Dean of the Black State University College of Law, we both posited that we will uphold the Constitution. Why? Because constitutionalism is the bedrock of democracy. It ensures accountability, balances power, and protects rights. It asserts that no one, no leader, no institution is above the law. Throughout history, we have observed that societies built on constitutional frameworks tend to foster stability, transparency, and equity. In our contemporary globalized landscape, we face a range of new challenges. The influence of markets and global forces can sometimes eclipse local governance and the protection of human rights. In light of this, it is essential that constitutionalism embodies both stability and adaptability. It must be robust enough to safeguard rights within one borders while remaining flexible enough to address the realities of our interconnected world. I kindly encourage each of you to take a moment to reflect on how your individual and collective efforts can contribute to the further evolution of constitutionalism. It is essential to recognize that constitutionalism is not a static concept, rather, it is dynamic. An evolving framework must be adopted and challenges faced by our society. I genuinely hope that we can continue our collaborative efforts to promote the legal structures and principles that not only acknowledge human rights, but also protect them. Our common aim should be to ensure that all people, regardless of their backgrounds, circumstances, have access to the fundamental rights enshrined in our constitutional frameworks. This conference has provided us with a valuable opportunity to envision a future firmly anchored in the core tenets of constitutionality. A future characterized by accountable governance, the rule of law, and a steadfast commitment to a universal human right. Thank you for your dedication and significant contribution to this vital cause. Let us persist in our collaboration to reimagine constitutionalism as a dynamic and adaptable foundation for democratic governance in our increasingly interconnected world. As we conclude, I extend my heartfelt thanks to the PLF administration for hosting us, to the graduate School of Law led by Justice Opelenia, Atty. Sabino and Ms. Miles Dominguez for their support, and to my students who exceeded my expectations. No reflective journal. Our esteemed panelists, starting with Atty. EVECAR, whom I first met during an IHL-HRL moot court competition where we served as judges together with the organization, the current ICRC legal coordinator. Her Excellency, Ambassador YULIIA, whom I first encountered in one of our meetings at the Philippine Council for Foreign Relations, where I am a member, and she was our go-host in one of those monthly meetings. And Fernandez, who happened to be a classmate of my batchmate in PCFR, Dr. Henry Academy of the Center for Global Best Practices. So thank you for sharing your invaluable time and expertise with us. To Lieutenant Colonel Miguela, the commander of the Assault Armor Battalion of the Philippine Marine Corps. For our CBG representative, headed by Lieutenant Pierre, thank you for your presence and commitment. To Sergeant Rizal Lapot, Philippine
Marine Corps, and Associate Dean, Mighty Dr. Well. Thank you for believing in our mission to create a ripple effect of kindness. As we prepare to part ways, I would like to encourage everyone to carry these insights into your families, communities, and institutions. In every circumstance, I kindly urge you to consider a kinder option. By making this choice, we not only reflect our shared values, but also contribute to fostering a more just, peaceful, and compassionate society for all. Together, let us reaffirm that constitutionalism, non-violence, and compassion are not just noble ideals. They are commitments that we hold in high regard. These principles serve as a foundation for a future that is truly democratic, peaceful, and rich in humanity. Good afternoon and God bless. We now proceed to the awarding of the certificate for our esteemed candidates. Let us start with a certificate of recognition to both Ambassador YULIIA Alexandrina, and similar to our dear panelists, Attorney EVECAR, CRUZ-FERRER. In sincere gratitude and acknowledgement of your invaluable time, effort, and expertise extended as a resource speaker in the conference organized by the Mansa Law class on international law developments entitled Law Security and Innovation, Advancing Future Ready Legal Frameworks. Given this 22nd day of November 2025 at the Constitutional Law, Gusaling, Ejercito, Estrada, Pamantasan, and Lungsod, Maynila, main campus in Maynila, Philippines. Signed by Dr. Alexandra, Faye Domingo, and George Divina Plenipotentiary.